So imagine it's 1940. You are a young boy growing up in Germany.
Right. Right in the thick of it.
Exactly. And the regime in power is just actively, aggressively building this massive machine of, racial purity and extermination.
Yeah, it's everywhere.
Right. Every street corner, every radio broadcast, every classroom lesson is just dedicated to this terrifying ideology. And you are Black.
Which is just a mind-bending reality to try and conceptualize.
It really is. And the thing is, this isn't some historical hypothetical, right? It's not an alternative history novel.
No, not at all.
It is the completely true story of a man named Hans J. Massaquoi, and his experience is just one of, thousands of hidden histories that we are unearthing today. So welcome to this deep dive into our source material.
So glad to be here to unpack this.
Yeah, today's mission for you, listening right now, is to explore this incredible digital archive and blog. It's simply titled Afro-Europe.
A very straightforward title for a very complex project.
Exactly. We are diving into a collection that meticulously documents the politics, the people, and, the culture of Black communities across the entire European continent.
And we really need to emphasize the sheer scope of this archive right out of the gate.
Please do, because it's massive.
It is. We are not just talking about recent events, or post-war immigration. This archive pulls us all the way from 16th century Lisbon straight through to web series launching in 2024.
Which is wild.
It is. And what's fascinating here is how this archive functions as a massive, undeniably powerful counter-narrative.
Right.
There is this pervasive, almost structural assumption in the global consciousness that the Black experience in Europe is strictly a modern phenomenon.
Yeah, it just started a few decades ago.
Exactly. People think it's just a byproduct of recent refugee crises or, mid-20th century labor migrations. But the raw data in this archive proves that this is a deeply rooted, multi-century reality. It's woven right into the very fabric of the continent.
Right, which fundamentally shatters that traditional, heavily curated aesthetic of European history we're usually spoon-fed.
Completely shatters it.
But wait, I want to back up to that Hans Massaquoi story for a second.
Oh, yeah.
Because it completely derails the timeline I had in my head. I know he was an editor for Ebony magazine later in life, but growing up in Nazi Germany, how does a Black child even survive that environment?
It's a miracle he did.
Right. The sheer psychological toll of existing in a society that rejects you on a molecular level is just unfathomable to me.
It is unfathomable. And the archive actually features a January 2013 video series detailing his survival.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and the psychological weight you mentioned. That is the absolute core of his story. You have to remember, he wasn't an outsider looking in. He was a German boy.
That was his home.
Exactly. He identified with his homeland. He spoke the language perfectly. He even wanted to join the Hitler Youth at one point.
Wait, really?
Yes. Because that was the societal norm for boys his age. All his peers were doing it. And he wanted that belonging, even as the state ideology literally categorized him as subhuman.
Man, that is just devastating.
It is. But highlighting his story isn't just about documenting Black trauma in Europe.
Right.
It's about claiming Black presence in the absolute epicenter of the defining events of the 20th century. History often paints Black people in Europe as existing only on the margins, like they're just on the periphery of the main story.
Yeah, totally.
But Massaquoi was standing right in the middle of the Third Reich.
Which just proves the point that we have to look past those margins. So I want you listening to imagine that we are walking through a vast virtual museum of hidden European history today.
I love that analogy.
Thanks. Yeah, we're going to shine a flashlight into these forgotten corners because the deeper you go into this archive, the more you realize that the history we've been taught is missing entire chapters.
Entire volumes, really.
Seriously. So let's look at the oldest historical evidence provided here because this genuinely broke my brain a little bit. We are jumping from Nazi Germany all the way back to the 1500s.
Yes, 16th century Portugal.
Right. There is a January 2013 article in the archive highlighting a 16th century painting from Lisbon, Portugal.
And we have to be clear, this isn't just a quaint piece of art.
Right.
It functions as hard documentary evidence. When the average person pictures a Renaissance city, the default image in their head is uniformly white.
Oh, 100%. It's like nobles in velvet, merchants in the square, all fitting a very, very specific European phenotype.
Exactly. But this painting reveals a deeply diverse Renaissance city.
It's incredible.
It shows Black people completely integrated into the urban landscape. They are participating in commerce, trade, and just the general daily life of a major European hub during the 1500s.
Okay, hold on. I have to play the skeptic here for a second.
Go for it.
If there are literal paintings from the 16th century showing a diverse Lisbon, how did modern historians get away with pretending Europe was entirely homogenous?
That is the million-dollar question.
Like, did they just look at the painting and mutually agree to ignore the black people in the background? Because there's another piece from the archive from October 2009 that talks about actual black European nobility just tucked away in the historical record.
Yes, hiding in plain sight.
Exactly. If the evidence is physically there, painted on canvas or written in royal ledgers, what are the actual mechanics of cutting it out?
Well, that is the essential question of historiography, really. History is not simply an objective, perfect record of everything that happened.
Right, it's written by the victors.
Exactly. It is an active process of selection, mostly determined by power structures. In the 18th and 19th centuries, as European nations were just aggressively building these global empires, they needed a framework.
And an ideological justification for colonizing the rest of the world.
Exactly that, and of course a justification for the transatlantic slave trade.
Right, they needed a narrative of inherent superiority.
Precisely. And a narrative of inherent superiority requires a narrative of total separateness and quote-unquote purity.
Right.
Acknowledging that Europe had a diverse past, or even worse for them, acknowledging black European nobility was just highly, highly politically inconvenient.
It messes up the whole brand.
It threatened the racial hierarchies that justified their entire economic systems. So historians of the 19th century, the people who actually built the foundations of our modern historical education, they simply curated those elements out.
Wow.
They didn't necessarily run around burning the 16th century paintings. They just didn't include them in the textbooks. They literally relegated them to the basement of the museum.
I mean, it's like a retroactive PR campaign for an entire continent.
That's a perfect way to put it.
Which makes digital archives like Afro-Europe so dangerous to the status quo, in the best possible way. They bypass those traditional gatekeepers and just present the raw data that disrupts the myth.
Exactly. They force a total reevaluation of what it means to be historically European. And that reevaluation, it requires looking at unexpected geographies too.
Like where?
Well, for instance, the archive features a January 2013 book review on the Black Russian.
Oh, this one blew my mind.
It's an incredible story. It documents the life of Frederick Bruce Thomas. He was an African-American man born in the late 19th century who leaves the United States and actually ends up becoming a prominent, wealthy entertainment mogul in pre-revolutionary Tsarist Russia.
I literally read that and had to do a double take. Tsarist Russia.
Yep, Moscow.
How does a black man from America, who is just one generation out of slavery, integrate into the absolute elite society of Moscow before the Bolshevik Revolution?
It's wild, right? But it really comes down to understanding the differing mechanisms of oppression.
Okay, unpack that for me.
So, in the United States, Frederick Bruce Thomas was trapped in a strict racial caste system.
Right, Jim Crow.
Exactly. His upward mobility was legally and often violently capped by Jim Crow laws simply because of the color of his skin. But when he moved to Europe, and specifically to Russia, he encountered a society organized around a strict class system, not a racial one.
Oh, okay.
In Tsarist Russia, a person's worth was largely dictated by their wealth, their aristocratic lineage, and their profession.
Interesting.
Because Thomas possessed capital, he had a ton of charm and obvious business acumen. Russian high society basically viewed him as a fascinating foreigner and a successful businessman, rather than placing him in a subordinate racial category.
So he essentially engaged in geographic arbitrage.
I love that phrase, geographic arbitrage.
He recognized the specific limitations placed on him in America and utilized Europe as a space for reinvention where those specific racial rules just didn't apply.
Precisely.
But again, how often is a black man included when we discuss the history of Tsarist Russia? I mean, I've watched countless documentaries on the Romanovs, and I have never seen anyone who looks like Frederick Bruce Thomas.
Almost never. It's that same curation process we talked about earlier. And if we connect this to the bigger picture, what's fascinating here is how it highlights the immense mobility of the black diaspora.
Yes, the movement.
The narrative we are so often sold is incredibly static. The idea is that marginalized people simply stayed exactly where they were subjugated until very, very recently.
Right, like they were just frozen in place.
But this archive proves that people have always been actively moving, negotiating their identities, and finding loopholes in oppressive systems. It literally inserts these figures back into the geographic and temporal spaces they actually occupied.
And that idea of negotiating identity brings us to a really fascinating pivot in the source material.
Definitely.
Because we've established that the history is there, stretching back centuries across Portugal, Germany, and Russia. But how do modern people living this reality define themselves today?
That's where it gets really interesting.
Right. This is where the archive shifts from just unearthing the past to actively documenting the creation of a modern identity. We see the birth and really the boom of the term Afropean.
The evolution of this concept within the archive is quite remarkable, actually, and it is largely tracked through the work of author and creator Johny Pitts.
Yeah, he's a central figure here.
The archive provides a very precise timeline of how this identity solidifies over the past decade.
Let's walk through that timeline, actually, because it really shows how a single idea takes root and blossoms into a movement.
Okay, let's do it.
So in July 2013, the archive features Pitts' photo book, An Afropean Odyssey. And it's subtitled A Black European Travel Narrative.
Right.
Just the phrase Black European Travel Narrative feels like a flag being planted.
It's very intentional.
Then, in March 2014, we see the launch of Afropean.com, which was designed as a multimedia journal.
Broadening the platform.
Fast forward a bit to August 2017, and there is a documentary titled Afropean Documenting Black Europe. And notably, this features a visit to the famous artist Squat Tuchella's in Berlin.
A very iconic cultural space.
Yeah. Then in June 2019, the archive heralds the release of his seminal book, Afropean, Notes from Black Europe.
The definitive text.
And bringing it right up to the present day, October 2024 announces Afropean, the podcast, and a brand new photo book launching in November.
So what we are witnessing through these archive entries is the actual architecture of an identity being built in real time.
Yeah, step by step.
Afropean isn't just a catchy buzzword. It is a necessary sociological tool.
A tool.
Yeah, think about the demographic we were discussing here.
Yeah.
Black people in Europe span dozens of countries.
Right.
They speak French, German, Spanish, Italian, Dutch, Portuguese, and English. They are navigating entirely different political systems, wildly varying economies, and very distinct colonial histories.
It's incredibly fragmented.
Exactly. Without a unifying banner. It is incredibly easy for these communities to remain fragmented. They stay isolated in their specific national struggles, completely unaware that someone 3 countries over is fighting the exact same battle.
I love that you called it a sociological tool. To me, coining the term Afropean is like creating a brand new, highly specific folder on your desktop to finally organize and make sense of brilliant files that were just scattered everywhere.
Oh, that's a brilliant analogy.
Because before this term, you had a file called Black in France, you had a file called Afro-German, a file called Black British, and they were completely disconnected.
They didn't speak to each other.
Right. But by dropping them all into the Afropean folder, you suddenly see all the metadata, you see the connections, the shared themes, and the collective weight of the experience. You realize it's an entire interconnected operating system, not just random isolated files.
That is an excellent way to conceptualize it. The term creates transnational solidarity. And Johny Pitts' progression that you outlined, from a physical travel narrative to a digital journal to a documentary to a comprehensive book, it mirrors the deepening understanding of that identity.
Right, it grows in scope.
He starts by physically traversing the space, literally proving to himself that these communities exist. Then he creates a platform for others to share their experiences. Finally, he synthesizes it into a codified cultural framework. The archive acts as the ledger, basically recording each milestone of this identity formation.
But even within that unifying Afropean folder, the files themselves are wildly different.
Oh, absolutely.
And that's where the archive gets incredibly nuanced. We have this overarching pan-European identity, sure, but the daily reality of a Black person in Paris is very different from a Black person in Rome.
Completely different contexts.
We're looking at national case studies of visibility versus invisibility here. So let's dig into France, because there is a June 2013 article titled Whose Liberté, Égalité, and Fraternité, Black in France Today.
That is a crucial piece.
And it touches on something so deeply structural.
It does. It addresses a profound tension that the archive captures just beautifully. France operates on a political philosophy of universalism.
Right.
The foundational idea stemming from the French Revolution is that everyone is a citizen of the Republic, first and foremost.
Everything else is secondary.
Exactly. to ensure this pure equality, race, religion, and ethnicity are officially not recognized by the state.
Which sounds good on paper.
They literally do not collect census data on race. So on paper, to a lot of people, this sounds like the ultimate realization of equality. It sounds like a truly colorblind society.
But we know that colorblind usually just means blind to discrimination.
Precisely. In practice, as the article explores in depth, this approach masks deep systemic inequalities. If the state structurally refuses to measure race, it cannot measure racism.
Right.
It cannot track housing discrimination, it can't track hiring biases, or police brutality targeting specific demographics.
Because officially the demographics don't exist.
Exactly. So Black French citizens are expected to assimilate perfectly into this ideal of liberté, égalité, fraternité, while simultaneously navigating a daily reality that frequently denies them those very principles.
It's like trying to diagnose a critical software bug, but the system administrators have literally banned the use of error logs.
That is exactly what it is.
If the state refuses to collect data on race, they've made it mathematically impossible to prove that systemic racism exists.
Yes.
You can't fix what you are legally barred from measuring. So Black French people are caught in this gaslighting loop where their struggles are dismissed as individual failures rather than structural issues.
That is a highly accurate mechanical breakdown of the problem. It's a struggle against a very sophisticated bureaucratic form of erasure.
Yeah, that's heavy.
It is. But then you look at other countries featured in the archive, and the struggle isn't about forced assimilation to some grand national philosophy.
What is it about?
It's about outright invisibility. In May 2013, there's an article literally titled, "Are There Black People in Italy?" alongside a mention of a project called Invisible Cities.
Wow.
And another piece from January 2010 simply titled, "Black People in Spain."
The juxtaposition there is wild.
Very striking.
In France, the struggle is about fighting for space within a highly structured, rigid national identity. But in Italy and Spain, the archive highlights a struggle simply to convince the broader population that they even exist. Why is there such amnesia there?
It has to do with migration patterns and national memory. Italy and Spain were not the primary destinations for the massive government-sponsored mid-20th century labor migrations in the way the UK or France were.
Okay.
Therefore, the broader societal narrative in those countries often frames their Black populations strictly through the lens of very recent, often undocumented immigration.
So they ignore anyone who was there before.
Exactly. The historical presence is erased by recency bias. The archive pushes back against this by declaring, "We are here, we have been here, and we are part of the fabric of these nations."
That's so important.
It even highlights Italian films like Bianco e Nero from 2011, which deals directly with race and interracial relationships in Italy. It forces a conversation that broader Italian society is often highly resistant to having.
And then there's Germany. The archive features a June 2013 short film called Our Rhineland.
Yes, a very poignant film.
It focuses on the modern, everyday struggles of Afro-German sisters. This creates such a powerful, almost jarring contrast for me.
How so?
Well, earlier we spent time talking about Hans Massaquoi surviving Nazi Germany, which is a very specific, horrific historical trauma. But Our Rhineland brings the Afro-German experience right to the present day.
It connects the past to the present.
Right. Which makes me want to ask you a pointed question. Based on these sources, is the experience of being Black in France fundamentally different from being Black in Italy or Germany? Or do these articles suggest a universal struggle across the continent?
It's a dialectic, really. You have to hold two truths at once. The micro-experiences are undeniably different.
Okay.
An Afro-German dealing with the specific historical shadows of the Rhineland occupation, where Black French soldiers were stationed after WWI, leading to a generation of Afro-German children who were later persecuted. That is a very different daily reality than a Black Italian facing a society that largely views them as a recent anomaly.
That makes sense.
The political mechanisms of exclusion change at every border.
Right. The French use universalism, the Italians use recency bias, the Germans have a specific historical trauma.
Exactly. However, the macro experience, the struggle for visibility, for historical validation, and against structural prejudice that is universally shared across the continent.
Okay, I see.
That is the genius of curating these distinct national stories in a single archive. It allows a researcher, or just the casual reader, to see both the unique local flavors of the struggle and the overarching pan-European reality.
And speaking of local flavors, we have to pivot here because the archive doesn't just focus on the heavy political struggles.
No, it doesn't.
It absolutely explodes with cultural expression. We transition from political visibility to what I'd call the soundtrack and the canvas of Afro-Europe.
The cultural output documented here is arguably the most vibrant counter-narrative of all.
It's amazing.
It proves that Afro-European identity is not merely a defensive reaction to racism. It is a generative, deeply creative force in its own right.
The music section alone is staggering in its diversity.
The range is incredible.
We had Conchabuca from Spain. We have the Spanish rapper El Chojin with his track Van.
Great track.
We've got Dutch singer Ntjam Rosie with a track called Love is Calling. There is Laura Isabor, a black Irish singer showing off Dublin. Ty, the UK rapper with his song Let's Start, and an entire documentation of the emergence of the underground UK black radio scene.
And if we look closely at Conchabuca, for example, we see the actual mechanics of this cultural fusion at work.
Tell me about her.
Well, she isn't just a black woman singing traditional Spanish music. She blends flamenco, which, by the way, already has deep roots in marginalized Romani communities. She blends it with jazz, soul, and African polyrhythms.
Oh, wow.
When she performs, she isn't leaving her diaspora heritage at the door to just assimilate into a Spanish art form. She is actively forcing the Spanish art form to expand and accommodate her entire identity.
Which is such a powerful subversion. I always think of art as a cultural passport.
I like that.
It crosses borders so much easier and honestly so much faster than people or political policies do. A Spanish rap track by El Chojin or a Dutch neo-soul song by Ntjam Rosie can travel across Europe and create a shared aesthetic, a shared feeling, long before the politicians in Brussels agree on a unified policy for minority rights.
That cultural passport is exactly what is forging the Afropean identity on a grassroots level. These artists are refusing the false binary that tells them they must choose between being black and being European.
Right. They're like, why not both?
Exactly. They are creating a third space through their art. And this is vividly apparent in the visual arts featured in the archive as well.
The visual arts section is incredibly rich. We have the Afro-Russian photographer Liz Johnson-Artur. There is the French visual artist Alexis Peskin, who had an exposition in Paris literally titled Rising Above France.
Incredible exhibit.
And Remy Jungerman, a Dutch artist who is specifically highlighted in a 2013 talk for connecting Afro-religion and art. Let's unpack the mechanics of what these visual artists are doing.
Well, let's start with Alexis Peskin, because his medium really is the message. He is known for creating massive, striking portraits of black figures by driving varying lengths of nails into wood.
Nails into wood, that is intense.
It is. And this isn't just an aesthetic choice. Driving nails into wood is a visceral, deeply physical act. It speaks to the pain of structural violence, but also the immense resilience required to rise above a system like France's, as his exhibition title suggests.
Wow.
The nail becomes a metaphor for being hammered into place, but also for holding a structure together.
That is brilliant. And what about Remy Jungerman? How does a Dutch artist blend Afro-religion with contemporary art?
Jungerman's work is fascinating because it is a profound reclamation of space. He frequently utilizes the aesthetics of Afro-Surinamese Winti religion.
What kind of aesthetics?
Things like geometric patterns, specific textiles, altar-like structures, and he brings them into the very secular, often sterile, minimalist spaces of Dutch contemporary art galleries.
Oh, that's a huge contrast.
By placing spiritual, colonized heritage squarely inside the high art institutions of the former colonizer, he is forcing a conversation about power, history, and spiritual survival.
He is literally putting the evidence of the diaspora on a pedestal in the middle of Amsterdam.
Exactly.
And this kind of reclamation is happening in literature and media, too. The archive highlights an interview with Zadie Smith discussing her mother, her father, and her seminal novel, White Teeth.
A classic.
It provides a curated list of over 30 Black European writers and poets that people should know. And then there's a 2024 web series called Strolling by Cecile Emeke, focusing specifically on Black French women in Paris.
These creators are providing the internal monologue of the Afropean experience. Zadie Smith's White Teeth was monumental when it was published because it didn't just talk about multicultural London.
Right. It wasn't an academic essay.
No, it captured the messy, hilarious, and deeply complicated linguistic reality of it. It actually sounded like the streets of London. And Cecile Emeke's Strolling series is vital because of its format. It simply allows Black French women to exist. They are literally just strolling through Paris, speaking their minds on everything from philosophy to pop culture.
Which completely counters the mainstream media tendency to only show Black women when they are highly politicized.
Yes.
Like, you only see them debating racism on a news panel or being exoticized in fashion. Strolling gives them the agency of the mundane. They are just existing in their city.
Exactly. They are writing themselves into the everyday European narrative.
But wait, as much as I love the art, the music, the literature, a beautiful Dutch neo-soul track doesn't stop police brutality.
No, it does not.
A brilliant web series doesn't automatically change housing discrimination policies. How does this archive handle the actual physical fight for rights? Because we really have to transition from cultural output to the literal fight for structural representation and safety.
You are absolutely right to make that pivot, and the archive does not shy away from it.
Okay, good.
It does not allow the reader to just get comfortable with cultural celebrations. It firmly anchors the Afro-European experience in the very real, ongoing fight for survival and equity. There is a May 2013 article detailing 7 Black European victims who inspired the fight against racism.
That's sobering.
It is a stark reminder of the physical stakes involved. We are talking about lives lost to racist violence and the subsequent mobilization of communities demanding justice.
It's a heavy, sobering reality check. The archive also highlights Afro-German musicians, a collective called the Brothers Keepers, in a February 2013 video.
Right.
They are actively using their platform to fight racism. They aren't just making music, they are organizing. They're basically a political action committee masquerading as a hip-hop group.
And activism takes many forms in this archive. Beyond physical safety, there's the battle for the mind, the classroom battle.
Oh, yeah.
There is a January 2013 video documenting a fierce protest against the removal of Black British heroes from the UK's school national curriculum.
I want to dig into this because textbooks are the ultimate political battleground.
They really are. The school curriculum is the state-sanctioned version of reality. It is the official museum brochure we talked about at the beginning of our deep dive.
Right.
If a government decides to actively remove historical figures like Mary C. Cole, she was a Black British nurse who served in the Crimean War, from the curriculum, they're effectively legislating erasure.
They're wiping her out.
They are telling an entire generation of students, both Black and white, that the Black British contribution to the nation is negligible or, at best, just optional.
That's enraging.
The intense pushback against this, which is recorded in the archive, shows that Afro-Europeans understand acutely that controlling the narrative of the past is essential for securing their political power in the future.
But alongside these fierce grassroots protests over textbooks and physical safety, the archive also features incredibly high-profile, glamorous representation.
Actually, it covers that too.
And this is where I need you to help me untangle something. We have a June 2012 feature on Black footballers representing their national teams at Euro 2012. We have a 2011 interview with supermodel Naomi Campbell. We have features on Black beauty queens like Tatiana Silva becoming Miss Belgium in 2012.
I can hear the skepticism in your voice.
Totally.
Yeah.
Because what does this all actually mean?
Right.
Does cheering for a Black striker on the French or English national team or crowning a Black Miss Belgium translate to systemic change? Or is it just a glossy veneer?
That's a valid question.
Is it bred in circuses that allows European nations to point to a screen and say, look, we aren't racist, our star player is Black, our Miss Belgium is Black, while completely ignoring the deeply segregated neighborhoods those exact same people came from?
This raises an incredibly important question, and it is perhaps the central paradox of the modern Afro-European experience.
It just feels contradictory.
The duality of representation is highly complex. On one hand, we cannot entirely dismiss the cultural significance of visibility. When a Black woman is crowned Miss Belgium or a Black man leads a national football team, it violently expands the visual vocabulary of what a Belgian or a Frenchman looks like on a global stage.
Okay, I see that.
For a young Black child watching, that representation provides a crucial psychological validation. It says, you can be the symbol of this nation.
Right, but it's kind of like being allowed on the stage to entertain the masses, but when the show is over, you aren't allowed in the boardroom to actually write the rules.
Exactly. Hypervisibility in sports and entertainment almost always exists, alongside systemic invisibility in politics, corporate leadership, and educational curricula.
Yeah.
And the archive captures this dissonance perfectly without trying to neatly resolve it. You can have a nation collectively cheering for Black footballers during Euro 2012, while in that exact same month, citizens are forced to take to the streets to stop the government from erasing Black heroes from the school books.
It's conditional acceptance. As long as you are scoring goals or walking a runway, you are a national treasure. But the moment you demand systemic equity, you are a problem.
It is the defining tension of modern Afro-European life. True systemic inclusion is still fiercely contested territory, even when pop culture inclusion appears to be thriving.
It's a tightrope walk. Now, as we move into the final section of our deep dive, the archive zooms out in a way that I found genuinely surprising.
It broadens the scope significantly.
We've spent all this time hyper-focused on Europe, right? Germany, France, Spain, the UK. But suddenly, the archive starts looking across the ocean. Why does a blog specifically titled Afro-Europe feature so many articles about the Americas?
Right.
This brings us to what we could call the transatlantic mirror.
It is a critical expansion of scope. The curators of this archive understand that an identity as complex as the Afropean one cannot be fully understood in a vacuum.
It doesn't just exist on its own.
No, it is intrinsically linked to the broader global movements of the African diaspora. The archive highlights a June 2013 piece on the migration of Black people from the Caribbean to Europe, which provides the immediate, literal connective tissue between the regions.
Right, the physical movement of people.
But it goes much further than just mapping migration routes.
It really does. If you look at the international tags in the archive, the breadth is wild. We have CNN's Black in America featured.
Yes.
We have pieces on Afro-Colombian films and the hip-hop group Town. There is coverage of Brazil's Black Awareness Day from November 2012, and an incredibly fascinating piece from September 2012 about Afro-Argentines, subtitled, Still the People in the Land of the Vanishing Blacks.
A very telling subtitle.
There's even a feature on Harry Belafonte discussing how oppression forced him into activism. Why is an archive dedicated to Europe spending so much time analyzing Colombia, Brazil, and Argentina?
Because the mechanisms of oppression and the strategies for resistance are universally legible across the diaspora.
Okay, let me offer an analogy to see if I have this right.
Sure, go ahead.
The global diaspora is like a vast root system. The trees above ground, whether they are growing in Paris, Bogota, Buenos Aires, or London, they all look different.
Right, different climates.
They have adapted to their local climates, they speak different languages, and they are separated by thousands of miles of ocean. But if you dig down, they are intrinsically connected underneath by shared histories of colonization, the transatlantic slave trade, and forced displacement.
That analogy of the root system is perfectly apt. By examining the trees in other climates, Afro-Europeans can better understand their own roots.
That makes total sense.
Let's look at the Afro-Argentine article, for example. Argentina has a long-standing national myth that their Black population literally vanished, or that they were completely absorbed to the point of non-existence.
Just gone.
Yeah, this was a deliberate project of national whitening in the 19th century. When Afro-Germans or Afro-Spaniards read about Afro-Argentines fighting against this myth of disappearance, they find a direct reflection of their own struggles against historical erasure in Europe.
It's recognizing your own reflection in a completely different mirror.
Precisely. And when Afro-Europeans look at an Afro-Colombian group like Town using hip-hop to protest political marginalization in South America, they recognize the exact same cultural mechanisms being used by rappers in London or Madrid.
And highlighting someone like Harry Belafonte makes perfect sense in that context, too. He wasn't just an American singer, he was a global activist who utilized his platform to fight systemic oppression worldwide, including the anti-apartheid movement in South Africa. He provides a blueprint.
He does. Featuring the Americas establishes a profound dialogue between continents. It basically declares your struggle in Rio or your struggle in Chicago informs our struggle in Rome and Berlin.
That solidarity is powerful.
The Afro-Europe archive features the Americas so heavily because you cannot understand the European branch of the diaspora without understanding the context of the whole tree. The solidarity generated by this global perspective fortifies the local activism in Europe.
It makes the world feel incredibly small, but the shared experience incredibly vast. And that really brings us to the synthesis of this entire deep dive.
We've covered a lot of ground.
We really have. We have spent this time walking through the Afro-Europe archive, and the sheer breadth of what we've uncovered is staggering.
Truly.
We started with the visual evidence of a 16th century painting in Lisbon. We unpacked the trauma of Nazi Germany. We dissected the political failures of French universalism. And we ended up analyzing hip-hop in Colombia, all through the lens of Black European identity.
It is a profound testament to the power of curation. What this digital archive fundamentally proves is that being European and being Black are not mutually exclusive concepts.
No, not at all.
They are not opposing forces. They represent a rich, centuries-old intersection that is constantly, dynamically evolving. Whether it is through the political insistence of French citizens demanding true data equality, the artistic fusion of Spanish musicians, or the historical reclamation of figures like Frederick Bruce Thomas, this archive shows a community that refuses to be written out of the story. They're actively writing their own narrative.
And for you, listening to this is exactly why seeking out these digital archives is so incredibly vital for your own understanding of the world.
Absolutely.
It is terrifyingly easy to get trapped in historical echo chambers. We accept the heavily edited museum brochure because it's what we are handed in school. It's neat, it's tidy, and it doesn't challenge us.
It's safe.
But when you actively seek out platforms like Afro-Europe, you realize how much of the human story is hidden just beneath the surface, waiting to be acknowledged.
Yeah.
You break out of the matrix of traditional history and finally see the code.
But breaking out requires active engagement. It requires training yourself to question the absences in the stories we are told.
Right, looking for what isn't there.
Exactly. If a single digital blog, compiled through dedication and grassroots research, can completely rewrite our understanding of Renaissance Lisbon, the realities of WWII Germany, and the complexities of modern European identity, well, it forces us to ask a profound question about the nature of the information we consume daily.
What's that?
If all of this history, centuries of art, nobility, struggle, structural political violence, and immense triumph, was so easily omitted from the mainstream narrative, what other massive pieces of human history are currently hiding in plain sight, just waiting for someone to curate them?
Oh, wow. That is the exact thought to leave you with today. If the story of Europe is this vastly different from the brochure, imagine what else is out there, walled off in those hidden wings of the museum waiting for you to find the door. Don't trust the brochure. Keep looking, keep questioning, and above all, stay curious. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.